The sky burned above the battlefield as smoke filled the air and fire danced across the wreckage of fallen ships and broken machines, and the screams of dying soldiers echoed into the wind, while silence followed each blast of war. On the cracked ground beneath twisted metal and shattered glass lay the small body of a young warrior girl, her armor scorched, her skin bleeding, her breath shallow, and weaker long silver hair stained red with dust and blood and ash. Her name was Kilira, a warrior of the Talarian alien race, known for their speed and strength and silence, in battle trained since birth, to fight without fear and to die without shame. Yet now her eyes were open wide, not with pride, but with something else, something hollow and cold. She tried to lift her arm, but the bones inside refused to obey, and pain shot through her chest like fire. But worse than the pain was the sound in her ear, the sound of voices from above, her own people speaking through their comms, their ship engines humming louder as they began to leave the surface without her. She heard them say she was too far gone, heard them say it was too risky to land again, heard them say she had made her choice by staying to cover their retreat, and now she would die with honor and be remembered in silence, as all warriors should. Kilira wanted to scream, but her voice was gone, and all that came out was a dry cough that burned her throat and tasted like rust and dust and fear. The engines faded into the distance, and the sky turned darker, not from night, but from the smoke of dying machines and burning metal, and she was alone, completely and truly alone, left behind by her own kind, left to die as the ground shook beneath her and the cold slowly crept into her limbs. Her fingers clenched the dirt, but she could not feel it. Her heart beat slow, her thoughts slipping away like sand through broken glass, and she closed her eyes, ready to let go, ready to accept the end. But then something strange happened, something that should not have happened, something that no Talari would believe. A sound unlike the others rang out near her, a low hum, followed by heavy footsteps, metal against rock, sharp and steady and strong, and not Talari, not one of hers. Then a shadow fell over her broken body, and a shape appeared against the flames, a tall figure, wearing strange armor, dull gray, with yellow lights on the chest, and a black visor that reflected the fire in his path. A human. He stood still for a moment, looking down at her, one hand on a scanner, the other resting near a sidearm. He seemed unsure, then crouched slowly, placing his scanner aside and reaching toward her neck to check for life. Kilira opened her eyes and met his gaze, her vision blurry, her body frozen, but her mind still holding on to one thing, one clear thought. Enemy. She tried to move, tried to push away, tried to grab the shard of metal near her hand, but her strength was gone, and the shard slipped through her fingers. The human pulled his hand back, watching her closely, his voice quiet and calm, but full of something. She did not know, something strange, something soft. He said, "Easy now, not here to hurt. You just trying to see if you're still alive." Kilira spat weakly, her voice dry like dust and sand. She whispered, "Why would you care, human? Just finish it and be done." The human didn't answer at first, his head tilted, as if thinking. Then he said, "I'm not a soldier, not anymore. I just came for scrap. But then I saw you, and—" He looked up at the smoke, then back at her, his voice quiet again and careful. "You don't look ready to die." She closed her eyes again, this time not from pain, but from something else, something she did not want to name, not yet, not ever. He stood up and walked away. For a moment she thought he had left her too, and her heart sank further into the dust. But then she heard the sound of shifting metal and the hiss of a ship ramp opening, and before she could think or speak or stop him, strong arms lifted her gently from the ground, her body screaming with each movement, but no pain louder than the shock inside her mind. He carried her into his ship, past crates of old tech and broken weapons and blinking lights that meant nothing to her, and laid her down on a soft bed, a real bed, warmer than the ground, more real than the fire outside. She looked up at him, her voice barely more than a whisper again. "Why are you doing this?" He sat beside her, wiping blood from her forehead with a cloth, his eyes hidden behind that visor, still, but his voice honest and strange. "Because I couldn't leave you, not like that." Kilira wanted to speak again, but sleep pulled her down like the gravity of a dead star, and her eyes closed as the ship lifted into the smoke and fire, leaving behind the battlefield, where she had been left to die, and where a human had chosen something no one else did. He chose to save her. The engines hummed low as the salvage ship climbed into the smoke-filled sky, the fires below fading into glowing lines, and the stars above stretching into cold distance. The ship was old-patched in places, with worn plates and humming wires, but it was fast enough and quiet enough, and right now it carried something no one expected: a Talari warrior barely alive, and a human man who had just broken the law to save her. Jace Renner sat in the control seat, his hands moving across the console, with calm skill, his mind racing beneath the surface, his eyes flicking to the side screen that showed a heat signature on the medical bed, one that still burned weak and small, but steady. Kilira was alive for now, and that made things complicated, very complicated. The voice of the ship's AI broke the silence in a smooth warning tone. "You are in violation of Terran War Regulation Section 9. Harboring an enemy combatant is punishable by death. Shall I notify Central Command?" Jace didn't even glance at the speaker as he answered, "No. Cancel all outbound signals. Delete all records from the last 2 hours. Reroute power to stealth mode and set course for neutral orbit." The AI paused, then replied with a quiet acknowledged command. "Accepted. Rerouting now." Behind him, Kilira stirred in her sleep, her breathing rough and uneven, her skin still pale under the blood and dirt. Jace had cleaned most of the wounds, but some were deep and some were infected, and she was still burning with fever. He had injected her with the best med gel he had stolen from an old station, but it wasn't enough, not for someone like her, not for a Talari warrior. Jace stood and moved back toward the med bay, stepping past crates of scrap and old weapons, past cables and boxes of power cells, all useless in this moment. Only the figure on the bed mattered now, only the question that echoed in his mind over and over: why did he save her? She woke suddenly, her body tense, her eyes sharp and glowing faintly silver with fear and fire. Her hands reached for a blade that wasn't there, and her breath came fast, like a hunted animal trapped in a cage. He held up his hands and took a slow step back, saying, "Easy, easy, you're safe. For now, I'm not going to hurt you." Kilira blinked at him, her vision blurred, her thoughts slow but clear enough to remember that face, that voice, the human who found her, who carried her into the sky when her own people had left her to die. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice hoarse, her throat dry like cracked stone. Jace replied, "You're on my ship, middle of nowhere, heading for a quiet spot to hide and rest." She looked at him with disbelief and tried to sit up, then winced and fell back, her body screaming at the effort. "What do you want with me?" she asked. "Why didn't you leave me there?" He didn't answer right away. He moved to a chair and sat near her, watching her carefully. "I don't want anything from you," he said. "I just couldn't walk away." Kilira laughed bitterly, a sound full of pain and anger and confusion. "You are human," she said. "You are supposed to hate us, to kill us, to leave us broken. You are not supposed to save me." "Maybe I'm not like the others," he said. "Maybe I'm just tired of watching everyone die. Maybe I saw someone lying in the dirt and couldn't let them go, not again." She looked at him with narrowed eyes, then asked, "Your people will kill you for this, won't they, for helping me?" "Yes," he said simply, "they will if they find out." "Then why risk it?" "Because I've been left behind too." That answer made her pause, her breath caught for a moment, and her eyes softened just a little, not much, but enough to see something deeper than blood or fear, something quiet and broken like a mirror that still holds the shape of what it once showed. She asked, "Your name?" "Jace," he said. "Jace Renner, ex-soldier, current scrap thief, and lawbreaker at your service." She blinked again and said, "Kilira, daughter of Clan Varex, elite Talari strike force, now discarded like old armor." They sat in silence for a long moment, the hum of the ship the only sound between them, as the stars drifted outside and the engines carried them far from the battlefield. Then the AI voice returned, "Incoming alert from Terran Patrol Vessel Sector 9 range. Closing fast, vessel ID matched to wanted status. Name Jace Renner, bounty. Confirmed, advise immediate response." Jace jumped to his feet and rushed to the console, pulling up the display. A Terran patrol ship was closing in, its signal strong and getting stronger. They had picked up his trace, or maybe they had been following since he left the moon. He swore under his breath and locked down all signals, switching the ship to blackout mode, engines, dim lights, cold even life signs dampened by the old stealth systems he had rigged for runs just like this. Kilira looked up weakly. "What's happening?" "They're looking for me," he said, "but if they find you, it's over for both of us." She tried to move again, tried to hide herself, her limbs shaking, her mind sharp despite the pain. "I won't be your death, human, I swear it." He helped her slide beneath a pile of old blankets and tech shielding the scanners. Wouldn't see her there, not unless they looked close, very close. The ship rattled as the patrol hailed him. "This is Terran Patrol Vessel Delta 7. Your ship is marked for inspection. Power down and prepare for boarding." Jay sighed and hit the comm, replying with a calm voice, "This is salvage hauler. Side, no weapons, no cargo. Just scrap from the outer fields. Come aboard if you want, but all I've got is rust and bad coffee." The boarding crew entered 10 minutes later, armed and alert, their scanners sweeping the halls, their boots echoing through the narrow paths. They questioned him, searched every corner, asked about heat spikes and strange signals, but found nothing. They stared at the tech piles, then moved on board and tired and ready to leave. One officer lingered near the bed near the hidden warrior and reached out toward the pile, but then the power flickered just a little, and the AI stuttered, sending a burst of static into his headset. He pulled back, annoyed, muttered something, and walked away. They left without another word, their ship fading into the stars behind them. Jace waited 3 long minutes, then pulled the covers back gently. Kalira gasped for air, eyes wide and mouth open in near panic, but alive. "That was too close," she whispered. "I thought they saw me." He nodded. "Me too, but we're still here, so that's something." She looked at him again, her voice quieter. "Now what happens next?" "Now," he said, "we hide, we heal, and we figure out where to go next. And after that, we survive." The stars moved slowly as the salvage ship drifted in blackout mode, its lights dim, its engines whispering in silence, its systems hidden beneath layers of code and old metal shielding, while far behind in the black a Terran patrol vessel scanned the empty void with cold eyes and sharp sensors, but found nothing alive, nothing illegal, nothing worth stopping for again. Inside the small ship, Kalira lay still beneath a ragged thermal blanket, her breath shallow, her limbs stiff, her body aching from pain and fever, her mind spinning from weakness and confusion and fear and something else, something like shame. Jay sat on the floor nearby, legs crossed, eyes on the console screen, fingers tapping commands into a cracked panel, trying to wipe the last traces of his trail from the stars, trying to erase the choice he had made to save the enemy girl dying in the dust, trying to forget the sound of her voice asking him why. The AI spoke in a soft whisper again. "Patrol ship, leaving skin range, stealth mode, effective, no threats in immediate vicinity. You may resume normal systems." Jace let out a long breath and leaned back against the wall, staring at the ceiling lights above that flickered with uneven power, his mind full of things he could not name, full of memories, full of regrets, full of that moment on the battlefield when he saw her broken and alone and made the choice that changed everything. He stood and walked to the med bed, pulled back the covers gently, and looked down at her face, pale and bruised and beautiful, in a strange, fierce way, like a blade dulled by battle, but still deadly, still sharp inside. Kalira opened her eyes slowly, her silver gaze meeting his with caution and fire and silence. For a moment neither of them spoke, just breathing in the stillness, just watching each other like 2 animals, waiting to see which one would strike first. He broke the silence first, saying, "We're clear for now. The patrol is gone. They didn't find you." She blinked once, then whispered, "I heard their voices, heard their boots. I thought they would drag me out and kill me where I lay. They would have," he said. "They would not have shown mercy, not to you, not to me, not after what I did." She looked at him closely and asked, "What did you do really? Why would a human risk everything for a Talari? Why would you do that for me?" Jay sat beside the bed, his voice low and quiet and tired. "I don't know, maybe because I was left behind once too, maybe because I'm tired of watching good people die, maybe because I saw someone lying in the dirt and couldn't pretend she wasn't there." Kalira closed her eyes again, her thoughts heavy, her chest tight, with more than pain, with something deeper, something she didn't want to admit, not yet, not ever. She said, "Your people will not stop. They will keep searching. They will hunt you for this." "I know," he replied. "That's why we have to move, and soon." He stood and walked back to the control panel, pulling up maps and flight paths, searching for places forgotten by both human and Talari command, places where no patrols reached, where no laws mattered, where they could disappear. Kalira slowly pushed herself up on one elbow, wincing at the pain, asking, "Where are we going?" Jace pointed to a small moon on the edge of the system. No colonies, no satellites, no signals, just rock and ice and shadows. "But I know someone there, someone who owes me a favor. Maybe he can help us, maybe not, but it's better than floating here, waiting to die." She nodded slowly, her face set with quiet resolve, then said, I will not slow you down, I can fight again. Soon I will earn the air I breathe on your ship. He turned to her and said, I didn't save you for payment, and I'm not keeping you here for dead. I made a choice, and I'm sticking with it for now. She looked down at her hands, still trembling with weakness, then looked up at him again. You are strange for a human. You are strange for a Talari. Silence again, then the engines roared back to life, the ship turning toward the dead moon, and the stars sliding by like ghosts. But the silence did not last long. An alarm blared across the console, red lights flashing across the cabin, the AI voice sharp, this time long range. Scan detected, unknown vessel approaching. High speed, no ID signal, possible mercenary class armament, level high, recommend evasive action. Jace cursed under his breath and threw the ship into a hard turn, the hull groaning under the pressure as stars twisted outside the window, the enemy ship closing in faster than expected, much faster, too fast to be patrol, too armed to be salvage pirates, maybe bounty hunters, maybe someone who saw the alert back in Sector 9 and came looking for a reward. Kilira sat up, gripping the side of the bed, trying to rise her legs, still weaker voice, strong though, give me a weapon I can fight. You can't even stand. Then crash the ship into them, and let us die together with teeth and fire. Not a great plan, he muttered, then shouted to the AI, deploy countermeasures, reroute power to rear thrusters, prepare jump drive for emergency burn. The ship jolted as plasma shots struck the outer hull shields, holding for now, but not for long, the enemy ship, gaining with every second, weapons heating up, preparing for a final strike. Jace's fingers flew over the controls, overriding safeties, burning old power cells, pushing the jump drive to limits it wasn't built to handle. Kilira crawled to the wall and pulled herself up using the cables and crates for support, her legs shaking, her breath heavy, but her eyes alive with fury and fight. She shouted, do it now, jump now, before they break us open. The ship screamed as the jump drive kicked in a wall of blue light, swallowing the cabin, and then silence as space bent around them, and they vanished into the fold. The ship emerged moments later above a frozen moon, its surface dark and jagged, its sky quiet and cold and empty, no ships, no signals, no lights, only stone and snow and the shadows of forgotten things. Jace slumped in his chair, breathing hard, sweat on his face, hands shaking from the strain. Kilira leaned against the wall, her voice softer. Now you saved us again. Not for long, he said. That jump cost everything we have. We're running on fumes. Then we make this place count, she said. If there is safety anywhere, it is here among the dead rocks, where no one dares to look. He turned to face her, his voice steady. We stay low, we stay quiet, and we figure out what comes next. She nodded once and stepped forward slowly, her strength returning, her eyes burning with purpose. Then we do it together. The frozen moon lay silent beneath the stars, its sharp peaks rising like broken teeth across the icy surface, shadows stretching far across the ground as wind howled through the narrow cracks in the rocks, the cold deep and endless, pressing into every corner of the dark world that had long been forgotten by both human and Talari alike. Jay stood outside the ship, wrapped in a heavy coat, his boots sinking into the snow as he looked out at the jagged horizon, his breath rising in clouds that vanished into the wind behind him. The ship sat quietly, its hull scorched and dented, its engines still groaning from the jump, its systems drained and flickering like an old lantern left too long in the dark. He ran a hand through his hair and turned back toward the ramp, his body tired, his mind spinning with too many thoughts, too many risks, too many what-ifs still burning inside his head like sparks with no place to land. Inside the ship, Kilira sat on the edge of the medbed, her body wrapped in bandages, her skin pale, but her eyes bright again, filled with the fire that had once marked her as a warrior of the Talari, her hand resting on a cracked datapad, her fingers shaking slightly as she tried to scroll through old messages left behind by soldiers who had never returned. Jace entered and paused for a moment, watching her silently, the way her eyes narrowed when she read, the way her jaw clenched with every bitter word, the way she looked both strong and broken at once, like a statue made of glass with a heart of stone. You should be resting, he said softly, walking over to her. She didn't look up. I've rested enough, she replied. I need to remember who I was before I lost everything. He sat across from her on an old crate and waited, letting the silence stretch between them until finally she spoke again, her voice lower this time. I was a shadow warrior, one of the best, fast, strong, silent, loyal. They trained me since I could walk taught me that weakness was death and honor was all that mattered. She set the datapad aside and looked at him for the first time, eyes filled with something that looked almost like pain, but deeper, something cold and sharp like guilt. I covered our retreat during the battle not because I wanted to, but because my commander ordered it. He said we had to protect the core unit, and I was the only one fast enough to slow the enemy down. I stayed behind, I fought, I bled, and when I fell I heard them leave, I heard them say I was already dead. Her voice cracked at the edges, but she kept speaking, kept the words moving forward like blades drawn in the dark. They left me on purpose, not because they had to, but because I was no longer useful, no longer perfect, no longer clean. They chose to forget me. And that is what hurts more than the pain, more than the blood, more than the cold. Jace nodded slowly, his voice quiet. I know how that feels. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing. Do you? He leaned back against the wall, his voice distant. Now, I was part of the Terran border guard long ago, stationed on a mining moon. Nothing important, just patrols, just routine. One day pirates hit us hard, took out our comms, our defenses. I was separated from my team, fought alone for hours. Then the order came, retreat, and they left without me. Kalira stared at him, not speaking. I held the line until evac arrived days later. When I got back, they blamed me for the damage, said I broke protocol, said I acted on emotion, not orders. I was discharged, stripped of rank, sent away, without honor, just like you. They sat in silence, again the air thick with memory and regret. Two lives broken in different ways, by different wars, but sharing the same sharp edge of abandonment. Finally Kalira spoke, her voice softer. Now, then why did you save me back there on the battlefield? Why risk so much for someone like me? Because I saw myself in you, he said, and because I couldn't do nothing, not again. She looked away and whispered, thank you. He shrugged. I didn't do it for thanks. They spent the next hour repairing systems, checking supply levels, rationing power, and sealing leaks. The work quiet, the rhythm steady, a strange peace settling between them like a calm after a long storm. Later, as the artificial night settled across the ship, Kalira stood by the small window, watching the icy winds outside, her breath fogging the glass. Jace walked up beside her, both of them silent for a while. She asked, do you think they'll come for us again? Jace nodded. Eventually, they always do. Then we must be ready, she said, gripping the edge of the frame, her eyes locked on the dark horizon. I will not be taken again, not by them, not by anyone. You're not alone this time, he said. She turned to face him, then slowly reached into the folds of her armor and pulled out a small glowing crystal. Its surface cracked, its light dim but steady. What is that, he asked. Something they left behind, something they never meant for me to find. She placed it on the table and activated a projection, sprang to life, showing a map, a signal, a hidden Talari outpost buried deep on another moon, far from any patrol route, far from any known base. She said this place was meant for exile, for secrets they didn't want anyone to see. My clan used it long ago, before the war began. It might still be there. If we reach it, we may find answers. Or danger, Jace said. She nodded both. He looked at the map, and then at her, his voice steady. Then we go there together. They packed quickly, gathering what little fuel and supplies they had, rerouting systems for deep space flight, making calculations on tired screens, and flickering maps. Every second a risk, every move a gamble, but both of them knew they had no other choice. As they prepared to launch, Kalira strapped herself into the co-pilot seat, her hands steady, her voice calm. Are you sure about this, Jace? He looked at her with a small smile and said, no, but I'm doing it anyway. She smiled back just a little, then turned to the controls and said, then let's disappear before the galaxy finds us again. The engines flared, the hull shook, and the salvage ship lifted from the frozen moon, rising through the thin air, past the black cliffs, into the stars. Once more, not as enemies, not as strangers, but as something else, something new, born from fire and betrayal and choice. Two warriors left behind by their own kind, flying toward something unknown, something hidden, something that might destroy them or save them. And neither one looked back. The stars stretched thin like silver threads across the dark sky as the old salvage ship drifted between systems, engines humming low and power flickering at half strength. The map glowing dim on the control panel, showing a long path winding toward the outer moons, where silence lived and no patrol dared to follow. Inside the ship, Kalira stood near the rear wall, her hand pressed against the cold metal, her mind filled with questions, her eyes locked on the small glowing crystal that pulsed faintly in her palm. The signal it held was weak, but alive, guiding them toward a hidden place, a forgotten outpost, where her people once buried things they did not want found. Jay sat at the pilot's seat, his fingers tapping the worn console, his face lit by the screen's glow and the flicker of warning systems, running hot fuel cells, low power core nearly dry. But none of that mattered, not yet, not now, because he had made a choice, and he was going to see it through even if the stars burned him for it. Kalira turned toward him, her voice quiet but strong. How long? Until we reach the moon. He answered, not long, a few hours, if we push the engines hard, but we'll be running on fumes. When we land, maybe less. Then we will land on fumes, and keep walking if we have to, she said, her voice steady, her eyes sharp again, like a blade reforged in the dark. Jace gave a tired smile, but before he could speak, the console lit up, with red alerts flashing symbols. Across the screen, the AI's voice rang out loud and urgent. Incoming transmission, priority level 1, source Terran command, open broadcast to all systems. He froze for a moment, then opened the channel, and a cold voice echoed through the cabin. This is Terran Central Command broadcasting to all ships. Bounty notice code red. Subject Jace Renner, former soldier turned fugitive, for harboring a known Talari combatant, wanted alive or dead. Reward 10,000 credits, plus full pardon for delivery. Kalira's eyes narrowed and her hands clenched into fists, her voice low and dangerous. They've put a price on your life. Jay stared at the screen, the words still glowing, the message repeating again and again in every language, across every frequency. Not just a notice, but a warning, not just a bounty, but a trap. He stood and paced the room, his mind racing. They want someone to find us, anyone, scavengers, pirates, mercenaries. All of them will be listening, all of them will be coming. She stepped in front of him, her voice like ice. Then we have to move now. We have to find the outpost and disappear before they close the net. Jace nodded and returned to the console, rerouting power and locking in the course. The engines roared louder, now burning through the last of the reserve fuel. The ship, shuddering under the strange stars, spinning past as the jump drive groaned like an old beast dragged from its cave one last time. Outside the window, the moon came into view, gray and cracked, and hidden in the shadow of a dead planet, its surface scarred by old craters and long dried rivers of metal, its signal faint but real. Jace brought the ship down hard, the landing rough and uneven, sparks flying from the rear thrusters, the hull groaning as they hit the frozen ground, sliding across the ice before skidding to a stop near a jagged cliff wall. Systems offline, power low, comms cut, engines dead. The ship sat silent, now breathing its last. Jace turned to Kalira, his voice calm. Let's find your ghost base before someone finds us. They gathered what gear they could, scanner, a pistol, 2 ration packs, and a portable light, before stepping out into the cold wind, snow crunching beneath their boots, air thin and dry, sky filled with stars that did not care who lived or died below them. Kalira led the way, her steps sure despite her injuries, the crystal in her hand pulsing stronger, now guiding her toward a narrow pass between the cliffs, where stone gave way to steel, where old doors, once hidden beneath dust, now flickered to life under her touch. The outpost was real, buried deep beneath the ground, hidden behind centuries of silence, its entrance cold and dark, its halls filled with shadows, but the air was breathable, and the systems hummed as they walked inside, lights flickering on one by one, waking from a long sleep. They reached the main chamber, and Kalira approached the central console, placing the crystal inside a socket that glowed with soft blue light. Screens came alive, showing records, old data logs, files of missions, secrets, names, dates, numbers, and then something more. A file labeled Project Echo, locked behind high security, encrypted in Talari code. Kalira's hand trembled as she accessed it, her voice quiet. This is what they buried, what they didn't want found. Jay stepped closer, reading the translation as it appeared on the screen, his eyes widening as the words unfolded before him. Not a weapon, not a tool of death, but something else, something unexpected. The file held plans for a bioengineered healing protocol, something that could regenerate damaged cells, fix injuries, reverse decay, even slow the effects of aging. A cure built from human and Talari genetic samples, created together by scientists from both sides before the war began, before the fear, before the betrayal. Kalira stared at the screen, her voice shaking. They were working on peace. They were building a future where we didn't have to fight. But someone shut it down, Jace said. Someone buried it and made sure no one would ever know. The console blinked again, showing a list of those involved. Some names Talari, some human, some marked deceased, some marked missing, all of them part of something bigger than either of them had ever imagined. Jace looked at her, his voice steady. We have to get this out. People need to see this. Both sides need to know. Kalira nodded, but her face was tight with doubt. If we send this, now they will trace it, they will find us, and they will destroy it before it spreads. He stepped back, thinking, calculating, then said, we need a relay, something outside this system, something fast, something clean. If we can get the data to one of the old comm towers near the drift line, it can bounce across a dozen networks before they catch on. But we'll need a ship, Kalira said, and ours is dead. Then we take one, he replied. If we can't find one, we steal one. If we can't steal one, we build one from scrap and hope it flies. She gave a sharp grin at the fire in her eyes returning. Then let's start with hope and work from there. They began to gather supplies, pulling power cells from the outpost storage, reconnecting old circuits, bringing long dead engines back to life, one part at a time, while outside the wind howled across the ice, and signals echoed through space, growing louder with every hour. The bounty was real, and the hunters were coming. But so was the truth, and truth could burn brighter than any fire. The outpost hummed with quiet life as old machines woke from their long sleep, power flowing again through broken lines and rusted panels, lights flickering one by one across the metal walls as Kalira and Jace worked in silence, both moving with purpose and focus, knowing time was thin and danger was closing in fast. Outside, the wind howled across the frozen land, sending dust and snow swirling into the air, the sky dark with storm clouds and the weight of coming violence. The stars above, hidden behind thick ice crystals, like the world itself, was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. Kalira crouched near the old generator, hands moving over wires and switches, her breath coming in short, steady bursts, sweat on her forehead. Despite the cold, her armor scratched and patched, her fingers quick and sure as she rerouted power toward the launch bay, where a buried vessel waited, its shape hidden under tarps and time. Jay stood beside the command console, eyes scanning the data still flashing across the screen. Project Echo still open, the blueprint for something powerful, something impossible, something that could end wars without blood, something both sides would kill to control or to destroy. He looked up at Kalira and said, the ship down there, do you think it still flies? Kalira gave a short nod, her voice firm. It was built for silence and speed, a Talari scout model meant to escape, not to fight. If the core holds and we charge the cells, it will fly, and if it flies, we will run. Then let's make it fly, Jace said, moving toward the bay door, pulling tools from a rusted locker and slinging a worn pack over his shoulder. They descended into the lower chamber, where the scout ship lay waiting, its sleek frame hidden beneath frost and metal sheets, engines cold but intact, wings folded tight against the hull like a bird too long asleep. Kalira pressed her palm against the activation panel, and the ship answered with the softest lights blooming along the sides, metal groaning as systems powered up slowly, life returning to its bones after years buried in the dark. They worked fast, removing panels, checking seals, replacing conduits, Jace repairing the navigation link, while Kalira linked the data crystal to the ship's internal system, feeding the files from the outpost into a secure drive, one copy encrypted and locked, ready to be launched into the stars if everything else failed. As the engines powered up, the warning lights on the control board turned green. One by one, systems, stable thrusters, charged hull integrity, holding the scout, was ready. But the storm outside was building, and they both knew it would not be long before someone found the signal, someone followed the trail. Then the AI voice returned, cold and sharp. Unknown vessel approaching, rapid velocity, no ID signature, detected, high risk of hostile intent, arrival in 4 minutes. Kalira froze, eyes meeting Jace across the bay, her voice like steel. They found us. Jace nodded, his face tight. Then we launch now, no time for full warm-up, just get in and go. They rushed aboard the scout ship, sealing the hatch as the outpost lights dimmed behind them, the engines roaring louder than the storm outside, the ground trembling as the ship lifted off, ice cracking beneath the thrusters, snow exploding into steam as they blasted free from the moon's surface into the dark sky above. The enemy ship broke through the clouds, seconds later, black and sharp and burning with red lights, weapons charged, shields up, a hunter built for speed and death chasing the bounty, with no care for mercy. Kulira locked the controls and punched the thrusters forward, pulling the Scout into a sharp climb, engines straining as they shot past the upper clouds into the cold vacuum of space, the stars flashing into view once more. The enemy ship followed close behind, plasma bolts lighting the void, streaks of fire and metal ripping past their hull. Kulira spun the ship hard, dodging left and right, her hands steady, her breath slow, as Jace worked to reroute power to shields and tracked the signal path they needed for the relay. "We need to reach the comm tower now," Jace shouted, "or none of this matters." "I see it," Kulira replied, a spike of metal rising from a dead satellite orbiting the nearby asteroid belt, a forgotten tower still linked to the drift relay. If they could upload the data there, it would spread across the system beyond the reach of anyone who wanted to bury the truth. But the enemy was too fast, too close, every second closing the gap, every shot rattling the hull, alarms screaming through the cockpit as systems buckled under the strain. "We won't outrun them," Jace said. "Not like this." Kulira's eyes narrowed. "Then we don't have to outrun them. We just need 1 second, one clear path." She reached into the console and armed the emergency core, her fingers dancing across the screen, redirecting power from weapons to engines to shields, and then back again, confusing the enemy sensors, masking their true heading. Jace loaded the data into the signal drive, placed it in the launch chute, and locked the targeting system on the comm tower. "Just 1 second, he whispered. "Just one clear second." The enemy ship surged forward, preparing to fire a final blast. Kulira pulled the Scout into a hard dive, rolling beneath an asteroid, sending debris spinning into the path of the hunter, buying them the time they needed. Jace hit the release, and the data drive shot from the side of the ship, a small dart of light arcing toward the tower, piercing the orbit and slamming into the relay dish just as the enemy fired. The blast struck the rear of the Scout ship, spinning its sideways, systems crashing, sparks flying across the cockpit. Kulira fighting the controls as warning lights screamed and the engines died. But the data was already gone, already flying across the network, already reaching places where neither Terran nor Talari command could stop it. Files opening on civilian screens, encrypted transmissions decoded by rebel scientists, healers, soldiers, all seeing the truth that had been hidden for years. The ship drifted in silence, now smoke rising from the panel, both of them breathing hard. Kulira's hand still on the controls. Jace slumped beside her, eyes closed, blood on his forehead. "You okay?" he whispered weakly. Kulira looked at him and gave the faintest nod. "We did it. The truth is free." He smiled, then closed his eyes and rested as the stars turned slow outside the cracked glass. Somewhere out there, worlds were waking to a new light, a new path, born not from war, but from what they had chosen together. And neither of them felt alone anymore. The stars above shimmered like cold glass as the broken Scout ship floated slowly through the void, its hull blackened from fire, its engines dead, silent, its lights flickering like the heartbeat of something still alive, but barely holding on. Inside the cockpit, Kulira sat slumped forward, her hand still gripping the controls, eyes closed, breath thin and slow, a faint hum, all that remained from the once roaring machine around her. Beside her, Jace stirred, groaning softly as his fingers twitched against the floor, his face pale and bruised, his head still bleeding, but his chest rising steady and stubborn, as always, the kind of strength that came not from training or war, but from never knowing when to quit. The ship drifted past the shattered edge of the asteroid field, dust trailing behind it like smoke across the cold stars. The enemy ship was gone, lost. When the relay went live and the wave of data burst across the system, no one had expected the truth to be so loud, so fast. The truth had teeth, and they bit deep into every screen and every ear that heard it. The Scout ship sent no more signals. The comms burned out, the power cells nearly drained, and the life support struggling to keep up. But the message had already been sent, and there was no going back now. The lie was broken, the silence shattered, and the war would never be the same again. Kulira opened her eyes slowly, her gaze falling to Jace, his breathing rough, his hands trembling as he pulled himself upright, using the wall for support, his voice barely a whisper, but strong enough to reach her through the cold. "We're alive." Barely, she answered with a weak smile. "Still alive, still floating, still breathing." Jace leaned against the side of the cockpit and looked out into space, the stars spinning slowly, the damage to the ship worse than either of them had feared. No thrusters, no NA, no beacon, and no backup plan. But they had done what they came to do, and now they were free in a way that scared him more than any prison. They had no command to return to no planet that would welcome them, no army that would call them heroes. But in the silence between the stars, they had each other, and that was more than either had ever truly known. Kylira pushed herself up, groaning as her ribs ached, her armor cracked, her leg numb from the crash. She limped toward the storage bay, checking the emergency systems, finding one last power cell still intact, and the emergency medkit half full. She returned to Jace and knelt beside him, hands steady, as she cleaned the blood from his forehead, patched the gash, and helped him sip water from the last sealed pouch. He looked at her, eyes wide and tired, and asked, "What now?" Kylira didn't answer at first, instead turning to the cracked view screen, watching the stars pass by like dreams too far to reach. Then she said, "We wait. Someone will come. Maybe not a friend, maybe not today, but someone." "And if no one comes?" Jace asked, his voice low. "Then we make it," she said with fire in her voice, "even if we have to crawl through space, one broken breath at a time." Far below them, the system stirred, the transmission they had sent spreading like wildfire, igniting questions, whispers, resistance. Some saw the truth and turned their weapons away, others doubled down in fear. But the balance had shifted, and every soldier, every leader, every hidden eye now had to choose which side they were truly on. Unknown to Kylira and Jace, another signal was already making its way through the void, a response to the call. They had lit a beacon for anyone still listening, and someone had listened, someone old and hidden, someone who had been waiting for a sign that not all was lost. Deep in the edge of the fringe worlds, a ship turned its course, a ghost ship. Some had called it a vessel said to be lost in the first days of the war, crewed by survivors, outlaws, thinkers, and warriors who had refused to follow either banner, who had vanished into the dark and built something new, something quiet, something strong. They had heard the signal, and they were coming. Hours passed, or maybe days, inside the scout ship. Time melted into itself, the stars unchanged, the cold unbroken. But Kylira and Jace remained awake, speaking in hushed voices, sharing pieces of their past, stories of pain and fear, but also of hope, of dreams of what they might build if they ever reached somewhere that still welcomed people like them. Jace told her about the rivers of his home world, the sky so wide you could see 3 moons at once, how he had watched them as a child and wondered what it meant to be alone among stars so full of light. Kylira told him of the warrior songs, the old chants of her people sung before every battle, not for glory, but for remembrance, so no one forgotten, so no death ever silent. Together they drifted through memory and silence, each word between them building something stronger than metal, something no weapon could break. Then, just as the last reserve power began to flicker, a sound broke the silence, a deep, slow pulse echoing through the ship, like a distant heartbeat. Kylira stood, eyes sharp, muscles tense, as she looked to the window, a shadow moving among the stars, something massive approaching, not with speed or rage, but with purpose. A ship shaped like no other she had ever seen, sleek and curved with wings like folded steel and lights soft like breath. It came closer and closer until its shadow swallowed the scout ship whole. A docking bridge extended, a soft knock against their hull, a message flashing on the control screen. "You are not alone." Kylira looked at Jace, and he looked at her, and together they moved to the hatch, opening its slow, hands ready for anything, and yet no fear in their hearts, because they had already given everything they had. The airlock opened and light spilled, and not cold or harsh, but warm and golden figures stood waiting, not soldiers, not enemies, just people tired of war and silence and loss, offering hands, not weapons, voices, not commands. A woman stepped forward, her face lined with age and strength, her eyes deep and kind. She looked at Kylira, then Jace, and said, "Welcome home." They were taken aboard, given warmth, food, healing, and space to breathe. The new ship, not a fleet, but a haven, a place where the broken could become whole again, where secrets were shared and trust rebuilt, one voice at a time. Kylira stood at the edge of the viewing deck, staring at the stars, no longer afraid, no longer waiting to die, but ready for something new. Beside her, Jace leaned on the railing, eyes still wide with wonder, as the stars opened before them like a book waiting to be read. The war was not over, and the road ahead would still be long and full of shadows, but they had sparked a fire, and others had answered, and now the dark had a crack of light. They would help build what came next, not with orders or chains, but with choice and truth, and the bond they had forged in the cold. and above them always the stars shone wide and bright and free.